In this video, I want to talk to you about the editorial by George F. Will, Being Green at Ben& Jerry. So George F. Will is a pretty famous editorial writer, and he's syndicated in quite a few platforms, newspapers, magazines. He's an excellent writer, and that's one reason I keep on using this essay. The facts of the essay are certainly dated. So, whether this essay now is 10 years old or 15-year-old or 20 years old, the point is that we're not looking at this essay in terms of how it relates to today's economy or today's energy use, but we're looking at it in terms of how a writer makes claims and makes them in a readable way and in a memorable way. Remember, I personally think that the highest goal you can aim at when you are creating texts, pieces, whether it be an essay or an editorial or something like that, a report, is to create interest, maintain it, and reward it. All right. And you're going to do those three things differently and to a different extent, depending on what you have to work with. If you have for example, if you're putting together a small, political cartoon or something, you want people to look at it, to get it, and to remember it, to somehow be influenced or moved by it. That's the reward. But these levels are going to be very small because your text itself, your medium, if you will, is just a small thing. Although you can do a lot with a political cartoon if you're an expert at it, or you just hit that perfect sweet spot with the picture and the humor or whatever, right? George F. Will is writing a short piece. I think it's a little over 1,000 words, and there's only so much you can do there, But nevertheless, with that size of writing, you're creating interest, maintaining it, and rewarding it. And he models that. He models that. So he also models certain things that really good writers in his position can do. And I want us to look at that as well. So we will be using this essay for certain assignments in the English class. And your assignment may be just a straight up summary as a standalone assignment. Okay, well that's one thing. Your assignment might be a critique as a straight up standalone assignment. Now a critique is going to involve a summary, but it will also involve an evaluation part where you get to share what you think about the article. A straight up summary doesn't have the evaluation part. So I know that I will very often use this essay, or excuse me, this editorial, and have my students work with it for a certain writing assignment. So depending on what class you're in, you might be doing just a straight up summary or an evaluation or a critique. And pay attention to that, because somewhere else in the class there's information about what I want you to do with this essay. But right now I just kind of want you to think about it with me. All right. So the first thing that we should notice is that the title is designed to grab someone's attention, right? Being Green at Ben and Jerry. Now it hints towards environmentalism, right? That's the whole being green part. But then at Ben and Jerry's, it's like, what are you talking about, right? So there's right off the bat through the title, George F. Will. I'll just refer to him as Will here on out. But by the way, when you refer to him in your essay, in your assignment, please introduce him. The first time you refer to him, use his full name, George F. Will. That's how he prefers to be referred to if you are going to use the full name, because that's how he wants his name to be when it's part of a byline or when it's printed, right? But then after that first use of his name in your assignment, then you go ahead and refer to him as Will. Now every now and then you can call him Mr. Will if you want to, but it's it's fine. It's accepted convention just to refer to authors by their last name, and so please do not refer to him as George. You know, as you mentioned him in your essay. Just George alone, just by his first name. Okay. Will is kind of right in the title saying, I've got two things here that don't seem to be connected. I've got being environment, the environmentalist movement, the green movement, and Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream shop, and so that is the connection is not necessarily obvious, and it's kind of interesting. What do the two have in common? So that title might get someone to just stop and read a little bit, right? Remember, the idea I want you to have in your mind is somebody that's flipping through a magazine and say an airport lobby or a doctor's office or something like that, in a taxi cab, and just has a lot of time to kill, maybe 20 minutes to kill. It's leisure reading. They don't have to read your article. So what are you going to do to make them stop on your page, right? So an interesting title, and then an easy to read or an easy to get into, introduction. And well, in this case, Will starts off with a mental picture. So there's a lot of concrete details that someone can start imagining, and it's an interesting analogy, if you will. A dinner table, and then a little dime on the corner of it, right? And then he says this is the area that would be open up to drilling. So. I want you, when you're thinking about this piece, again, the facts themselves are going to be shifting all over the place because years have passed from when this piece was written and what's going on today. So the numbers aren't going to align. I don't want you to necessarily be coming to Will this way, right? I want you to be examining what he does with analogy, what he does with metaphor, what he does with his logic, what he does with suggestion, what he does with concrete images. Does he make his claims in a fair way, or is he causing you to make jumps that he himself is hesitant to make, but you might make? We'll talk about that later, and that's really what I want you to be thinking about as you read this. But you know, there's a very strong visual metaphor or a picture that he opens with, and he's asking you to look at that dinner table and to consider that dime as the area of the Arctic National Wildlife Reserve that would be open up to drilling, right? And what's the problem with the little dime, right? And notice that he never mentions principle, right? That the fact that there are some lines that need to be drawn and held by principle, and no matter how easy it might be to cross that line, or how maybe inconsequential, in terms of consequence-free, it's just a small thing, just to drill there. But see, once you open up that little area, might it not be easier to open up other areas, So the point of drawing a line and holding on to a principle is that you have the self-discipline to say no to the little step over, because as soon as you do that, you have pores in your line of discipline or your line of principle. But see, on the other hand, it's tricky to have sort of a principle that you hold as absolute, right? And you never allow for the exception. So I'm not saying that Will is right or wrong in advocating what he's saying, what he's promoting as far as drilling, but it is interesting to think of the definition of a principle and what it means to be principled, and what it means to have principle. And when should a principle be absolute? Okay. And great works of literature have been written about this. I mean, Les Miserables, right? And Jean Valjean, they was just starving, and steals a loaf of bread just to eat, and that begins his whole trials and tribulations, right? Or in Hamlet, there is a Prince Fortinbras that has taken an island, that is preparing an army to take us to defend a very small island, just a few acres of dirt off the shoreline. And why would so much death be spilled just to defend that small island? Because Fortinbras has a principle that he is not going to allow to be breached. All right, well let's keep on going. Will then goes on to say, right, that what happened in Congress was a vote that wasn't really based on the needs of America as a whole, but based on the needs of the politician. The politician voted to appease or to promote the cause of their own specific group, their constituency, right? The group that elected them. And so if farmers, really maybe say elected 2 or 3 politicians to Congress, those ones needed to vote against bringing any new oil sources into the U.S. because the farmers needed to sell their corn to the government, their surplus corn. Of course, they're selling some corn for edible purposes, but they're selling a lot of corn so that it can be turned into ethanol, turned into gas, used to run our cars. And, if we're bringing in new oil from our own land, from the Arctic, their own sales of ethanol are going to go down, And so the politicians are voting because they know that that's what their farmers want, right? And Will presents this in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs as sort of a negative thing, right? He's going to say, well, politicians aren't really making the right decision. They're just making the decision that benefits their own sort of siloed groups. Oh, and so can you understand that as a general claim? By the way, if you're writing a summary for this, which you're going to need to do in my class, this assignment I usually assign to essays that involve at least a summary. Sometimes it's a standalone summary. I just want you to practice writing a summary. Sometimes it's a summary and an evaluation, or what's called a critique. But see, that has a summary as well, right? So when you're writing a summary, you need to really just say, this is my time to just focus on delivering what George F. Will says. It's not a place to share my opinions. I just need to condense everything he said into some 4 or 5 major points, right? I need to be general about this. I don't have space here for details. So, one thing to just straight up say, as a general point, is that Will is saying that politicians vote to please their specific groups, not necessarily with a view to what's good for the whole country. All right. But Will does seem to say that this is a negative thing, that this is a selfish thing. Now, I would come at this, right, and my own opinion might be, well, what else do you expect a politician to do if they're representing a certain state? They need to vote as the people of that state would vote. So that's the nature of a representative government, is that this one person represents 100,000 people, not the 200 or the 300 million that make up the United States. You know what I'm saying? They represent only the 100,000, and they need to vote the way that constituency wants them to vote. They made a promise to that group that they would represent their interests, and that's why you have 100 senators, so that overall, at the end of the day, the individual interests can be represented there, and then things will be balanced out because against other individual interests. You know what I'm saying? So I just feel that here's something that you can respond to in your evaluation, because remember, I'm sharing this as a thought that I'm having to Will's point. Will says this, that politicians tend to vote only the way their own constituencies vote, just so that they can keep their job, right? And then Will sort of suggests that this is a negative thing, right? Now, in the summary, that's all you need to say, because remember, the summary part is just trying to faithfully reproduce what Will says. You do not bring in your opinion on a summary, right? You need to pretend that he's actually sitting there on the other end of the room or whatever, or maybe he's sitting across the table from you and he's saying, look, I've got a 1,000-word piece here. I need it condensed down to 200. Can you do it for me? And then you do it and you send it over to him and let him read it, and he looks at it and says, yeah, that's what I said. Those are my main points. And actually my big point, my overall point is also mentioned here. And you did a good job, cutting out 800 words and still keeping my message. You know what I'm saying? So that's what you need to do when you're writing a summary. But then I'm sharing with you some thoughts I have about, well, isn't, for example, why is that wrong? Why is it wrong for a certain politician to vote like the farmers would vote for corn? So that would be my opinion, right? And that would be put down into the evaluation part if I'm writing a critique. If I'm writing just a summary, it would never come into my assignment. But if I'm writing an evaluation, I would put that in the evaluation. Well, let's keep on moving on, all right? Will presents a definition here. He defines what he believes to be an energy crisis. That definitely needs to be in your summary. Now, if you agree or disagree with if you disagree with his definition, you can put that in your evaluation and say, I think his definition needs to be a little stronger or a little broader or more broad or whatever. You know what I'm saying? There's something else that Will does that's pretty interesting, and that is he says something about Bill Clinton, but then he doesn't say something about Bill Clinton. So if you can find that paragraph, I think it might be paragraph 5 or somewhere around there, but there's a paragraph that's all about Bill Clinton and the fact that Clinton put some of our coal off limits. He said he had legislation that said we shouldn't burn this coal because it's not clean enough, American coal. And that meant that a European coal had to be shipped in that's cleaner, and we can burn that in our power companies, coal-fueled power companies. And there was one business group that really benefited from this, the Lippo Group. And this Lippo Group, provided Clinton with a big campaign donation. And George F. Will gives you these details, right? And what might the average reader think when you're reading this little story, this little vignette, or this little, about this event or these series of events? There's a couple versions that you can draw up. Now, if you look carefully at the paragraph, you can see that the paragraph allows for 2 interpretations, right? One interpretation is that somehow Bill Clinton somewhere, or if it wasn't Clinton, it was someone in his staff, met with some of the owners or directors of power companies in Europe or the Balkans or somewhere around there, and they made a deal, right? And Clinton or one of his proxies said basically, if we do this, then you're going to get a whole lot more business with us. But we expect something in return. We expect you to provide a campaign contribution. And in fact, a foreign contributor may not have been under the campaign laws of the United States. Maybe they could have donated a ton of money, right? I don't know those laws, but the idea is that one way to look at this is that this was prearranged, right? But there is another way to look at this. And that is that this just kind of happened in a innocent sort of natural way. Let's say that America's coal. Now notice that Bill says it's our cleanest burning coal, right? But that does not mean that's actually clean to an international standard. It just might be this is the best America can do. But even our best is dirty compared to what a Europe can do in terms of developing clean coal, right? So if there's an international standard, our best doesn't mean that it is the best or that it's actually clean. If I were to run a marathon, my best time might be 10 hours. I don't know, but I'm sure there's someone out there that can do it in 4 or 5 hours. So the fact that it's America's best coal doesn't mean that it's actually clean coal. Do you understand what I'm saying in terms of an international standard? So maybe our coal was still very much of a polluting factor, even though to us it's our best. And maybe Clinton was actually right to put that off limits, and maybe the coal that we imported in was in fact markedly cleaner, and maybe after 6 months of this or whatever, there was a company up there that looked at their books, they looked at their financial sheets and records and said, "Whoa, we had a huge profit in in the last 2 quarters. This is incredible. What's really going on here?" And then they realized after the fact that the sales to the U.S. went way up, and they're like, "Well, how did that happen? Because for the last 5 years, it hasn't been like this, or 10 years." And then they go look at current laws that have been passed, and they realize, "Oh, the current president just did something that really helps us. Whoever that bloke is, let's donate to keep that person in office." In other words, this could be the result of a series of events that had nothing in common in terms of collusion, in terms of a conspiracy, in terms of a prearranged meeting. If you look at the way George F. Will gives you the facts, both interpretations are possible. Okay, but he doesn't say one or the other. He doesn't actually pick one of those interpretations because he's protecting himself from a libel lawsuit. Okay, he lets you pick it, and those people that are angry at whatever might pick a negative view. If they are distrusting and are very suspicious about certain other things, they might just very quickly become suspicious about Clinton, and they might pick a certain view. But notice that Will doesn't point out exactly what happened. He lets you do that. So that is a very interesting technique as a writer. Now, in my summary, I might say that George F. Will thinks that sometimes environmentalism is a cover for crude politics. To support this view, he provides details about Clinton's administration when they closed off American coal and imported foreign coal. Will leaves it to the reader to determine whether that was prearranged or not. Period. I would put that in my summary, right? But in my evaluation, that's when I can respond to this and I could say that was a masterful touch. You know what I'm saying? Because Will, as an editorial, as an opinion provider and leader for certain groups of people that read his work, he is protecting himself from actually explicitly saying something, openly saying something, but he knows how to shepherd he knows how to direct his readership into the lines that they want to be directed into. He nudges them, and so that might be something that I talk about in my evaluation that speaks to his skill as a writer, but also I might question, the legitimacy of it, because Will knows people are going to misinterpret him, and yet he continues on with this, right? Because one thing that keeps editorials working, that keeps them syndicated, editorial writers, is their ability to polarize communities and to seem to speak to the heart, of the people who read them. The person who reads them needs to say, "That's my boy, that's my gal, that's what I'm saying." They need to feel that connection, and Will seems to really be wanting to do that. Notice what he does with the final analogy, for example. If someone is writing if someone is reading this editorial and is just suspicious of everything, or really doesn't like, the green movement, if you will, then Will gives them fodder to really just sound off on this. See, Will brings in an analogy. Now, this isn't the title, right? The Ben and Jerry thing. So this needs to be in your summary too. That he tries to drive home his final point by making a memorable picture, a memorable analogy, of eating ice cream. And but one mistake that students often make in writing a summary is they think that this is Will's original metaphor or analogy, if you will. It's not. Will gives credit to someone else. This is someone else's view that was published, and Will is using it. Okay, so be careful about that. But the picture is there, right? The analogy is there, and Will is basically saying, hey, consider a bowl of ice cream. Let's consider. Let's put it in Ben and Jerry's, and he picked Ben and Jerry because Ben and Jerry is a company that is very proactive in terms of identifying themselves with the green movement. Okay, but and with political causes, so they're not afraid to align themselves very clearly with certain political causes that the owners of Ben and Jerry have. Well, well, just really quickly, I mean that means that Ben and Jerry is not necessarily interested in selling ice cream to everyone, although they certainly will. But they're much more interested in becoming an identity brand. In other words, we want our ice cream to be the ice cream of this group of people, because if they stay solid with us, we'll always have a decent business. Well, anyway, let's keep on moving. There's this picture of, if you just think about how much energy goes into a bowl of ice cream, energy that leaves a large carbon footprint, then just eating a bowl of ice cream is a hypocritical act for an environmentalist. That's basically what Will is saying with that metaphor. And I need to put that in my summary. Now, if I'm writing after the summary an evaluation, okay, then I feel like I need to, this is a very interesting ending. I think you should respond to this. One, it has a memorable quality to it. He knows what he's doing. He's trying to keep you, he's trying to open up with a visual picture, right? And he's closing with a visual picture, because these things are easy to remember. You remember the beginning and the end of something, you're probably going to remember the middle. But anyway, is he fair? Because we're all human, and none of us are machines. None of us is a machine, and we can't just be zoned in on something all the time. I think we all enjoy a break from our values, from our political activities, and in the sense that we like to do things like watch movies at a theater. We like to go on cruises, or take vacations, fly somewhere. We like to have a bowl of ice cream. Is it okay to do that? But if you look at the carbon footprint of, say, going to see a movie in a theater, I mean, the room is huge, and the climate control of that room, whether it's heating or cooling it down during the summer, that's going to take a lot of energy. And if you look at the 20 people that are in that room because the movie's already in its third week or whatever, those people are not, their money is not offsetting the cost of that energy. But even if it did, the fact of the matter is you're still using a lot of fossil fuel to run your heating or cooling. Now, again, I'm not saying they're plugging into an electric generator out there, but if the electricity is coming from a coal burning plant, you're burning fossil fuel to run the electricity to heat or cool that huge room. So should we stop going to movies? Should we not go on cruises or fly on airplanes because of the vast amount of fuel that they consume? I mean, why go to Italy when maybe we could just have a 2-week vacation in Vermont, or some beautiful, or maybe you want to go to the New Mexico and enjoy the wonderful Western scenery. I don't know, but do you really need to, be on this huge gas guzzling vehicle that's going to spend a month out in the ocean? Is that hypocritical? When you think of ice cream, it seems so innocent. But if you look in terms of the way it's been produced, the amount of cream that is needed, the amount of gas that needs to be for shipping, and for the amount of electricity for cool, Will spells that out for you, and he says basically, shame on the politician that says they are an environmentalist, but then they also eat ice cream. And what do you think about that? Do you think that's fair? I think that's something that you would put in your evaluation, but you do need to kind of suggest what George F. Will is saying in your summary. You need to kind of explain what he's trying to do with that metaphor in your summary. So I'm sorry if this video is a little confusing, because I would like to do one video that works for both assignments, and you might be doing just a summary and not necessarily thinking about the evaluation, or you might be doing the critique and then you have to think of both. So thank you for working with me in this video. one thing that I do want all of you to do if you're using this for an assignment is that you want to remember that although, of course, I'm going to read it, you're sending it in to me. You need to imagine that you're going to finish this thing off and then you're going to give it to someone who's never read George F. Will, Being Green at Ben and Jerry. So you do need to have a summary at the beginning. I mean, I've been mentioning this throughout the video, but in the first word, I would suggest to you that the very first line or two that you have in your summary, you identify the author, the name of the article, the date, the publication, something like this. In his Newsweek, in his 2002 Newsweek editorial, quotation marks, Being Green at Ben and Jerry, close quotation marks, columnist George F. Will makes a point about energy. Period. You see what I did? I gave you the full name of the author. I gave you the full name of the article. I gave you the publication, platform, CNN or Newsweek, and then I gave you the 2002, I believe, the date of publication. You have to check that date. Of course, it's going to be really dated, but anyway, I did all that in one sentence, right? And then after that, you know, it's all about Will. Will says, Will thinks, Will believes. Will points out. Finally, Will hammers home his major point, but you know what I'm saying? It's all he says, he thinks, he believes. Do not bring yourself into that summary. Now, if you're just writing a summary, then at that point, put a works cited page. You can treat this as a handheld magazine, even though it's like a PDF or something, or whatever it is, a digital format. It exists separately as a Newsweek article. All right, so I gave you the page number and all that. You can just treat it as a handheld magazine. Okay, when you're looking at a sourcing for MLA or APA. Now, if you're doing an evaluation after you do the summary, you need to transition into the I say, I think, I believe part. And some of you might be coming from a couple of classes previously where maybe the teacher said don't use the I, the me, the my. Don't use the first person personal pronoun in college writing. All right, and I thoroughly disagree with that, because the real rules, there are just a very few absolute rules when it comes to grammar, but many writing rules are really sort of an evolutionary result of rules as the culture moves on and how we treat information, and the real marker as to what you can or cannot do in professional writing or semi-professional writing is just to look at what's happening in the major newspapers and in the books of the day. So if you look at the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, if you picked up a few narrative nonfiction books, in other words, nonfiction books that are trying to be sold to the general public through your public libraries, and you look at how authors use words and how they use punctuation and how they use the first person pronoun, I'm telling you, you can use the first person pronoun. Okay, if professional writers are doing it in nonfiction work, then you can too. And so I think it's very important for you to signal in your evaluation that you're moving into your own thoughts here. And I would love to see something like, after I read Will's article or editorial, use the word editorial, I had a few thoughts of my own. First, I'm wondering, or bring in the I. It's going to work. Trust me. Okay, listen, I hope this video has been helpful to you. Thank you for watching.